This program is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not contain medical advice. Always contact your physician or qualified healthcare provider with any questions regarding a medical condition. Hello to you from wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. This is Refined for the Mind, and I am your host, Tracy Cabavito. This episode is all about love, and we are going to be talking about the ideas that Bell Hooks presents in her book, All About Love. And today we are going to explore some of those foundational truths that Bell Hooks shares in her book about what love is and what she believes love to be, because I felt that the definition she gave about love is one that resonated with me deeply. So, what is it that she says about love? Based on a quote that she gets from M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled, she says that love is the willingness to extend oneself for the nurturing of one's own or another's spiritual growth. I kept on thinking about these words, and I kept on thinking about what they mean to me. And I couldn't help but pay attention to those things: extension of oneself or for the nurturing of one's spiritual growth or that of another. And I think that's the aspect that's missing in a lot of things. You know, we want to give love when we feel we should give love, or what we sometimes confuse for love isn't actually love. So let's talk about some of the foundations that she explores within her book. Care as a form of love. What does it mean when someone cares for you? This has a lot to do with provision for your health and for your welfare. And this is the kind of love that we usually receive within our home, from our parents or from our siblings. When someone makes sure you have the most basic of needs, your clothes, shelter, or food, or water, this is care. But even care alone does not encompass love completely. It's especially as a child, it's your expectation to receive that kind of care from the people who are around you. And so if then that care is not there, then there's an aspect of love that's missing. But this alone does not encompass what love is. Love encompasses affection. Affection is what we will usually feel towards our caregivers when we're still younger, in our foundational ages. When we're still much younger, we look to our parents to give us affection, and they also look at us and they also look at us and receive that kind of affection, because children, I believe, are affectionate beings. And so in that case, affection has a lot to do with the feeling, the fondness, the liking. Oh, I like this. I like babies. I like this. And even this alone cannot cover what love is in its wholeness. And when we start to explore love a little more, then we realize there's so many other aspects of it. And the other aspect would be recognition. I want you to look at recognition as your ability to acknowledge another person's existence. That moment when you walk into a room full of strangers, say perhaps the person who's going to be serving you in a restaurant, or the people who serve you within your home, the aspect of recognition comes in when you are able to see them beyond just people who are just there to serve you. If you recognize them and acknowledge their existence, then what you are doing in fact is extending a form of love. So if you pay attention to someone and you allow yourself to really see them, and it's not just a matter of I've seen this person, yes, they've come to serve me, but asking intentional questions about, oh, how are you today? How's your mind? How is your heart? It makes the other person feel that indeed there is someone in the room who sees them. And yet so many times there are people who are prone to not being seen. I've always told many of my friends that one of the most painful things is not to be seen. It's almost like you're in a room, or it's almost like you're in a room, or when you're not in the room and nobody even notices. I'm saying this, and I'm instantly thinking about I'm thinking about some of the films I've watched. I'm not sure many of you have seen Unseen. It's a film about this lady who goes on a spree to kill so many people, and because she's naturally unseen in her waking life, it almost goes unnoticed. Everyone is looking everywhere for the person who's killing all these people, but they cannot pay attention. They cannot even imagine that she could be the one, because she's just a mere cleaner, and everyone thinks it couldn't be that person. They wouldn't be able to execute such a crime. So that's what happens when we fail to recognize people, when we fail to see people. So we can see that in many ways, this part or this aspect of love is missing a lot in our loveless society. We do not see other people, especially people who we do not need things from, or people who we usually wouldn't acknowledge in our waking lives. So I like that Bell Hooks puts recognition as one of the foundational aspects of love. She goes on further to explore respect. Respect in love. What does it mean to respect in love? Respect means we have admiration for somebody's qualities or their achievements or the values that they have about themselves. They're people who you will gravitate to naturally because of how they respect themselves, how they carry themselves. Respect is something that is earned, and yet so many of us, especially when we are children, we are forced to respect people who as we get older, we realize, why would I be giving respect or extending respect to that person? I don't think they deserve the respect that I'm giving them. So then from a young age, our idea of respect is kind of skewed, especially in a society like in a society like the one I've grown up in. Respect is such an outward show. So it's sometimes it has a lot to do with like the cultural things. Oh, when you see elders, you kneel down and greet them, or you do ABCD. There's so much of an outward show of what respect is that adults themselves forget to respect themselves. They do things that engrave such strange and bizarre images in the minds of children. And so children are somewhat confused and they're grappling with this idea of, is this something that I should respect, And so respect has a lot to do with qualities, and it has a lot to do with achievement. It has a lot to do with values. And so when someone respects themselves in how they speak or how they engage with other people, how they relate with like the society at large. So respect is an important foundation of love in that sense. And we also see her exploring commitment. Commitment has a lot to do with action, being bound to an action or a course of action, either morally or legally. When you commit to something, you're basically pledging allegiance to something. It's again, it's this making a deliberate choice to be loyal or to stand by the morals that you have agreed to, say in a church. When people go ahead and decide that our love is strong enough and now we want to take it before God, it's your ability to stand by the vows that you have made and be loyal to this person. But away from that, it doesn't have to always be in a church or anything. Sometimes just your morals and the values and the things that you believe have to be in alignment so that you commit to something, even if it's your work. It doesn't even have to be about people, We're talking about love in general, but I want you to think of this not just as a way to love yourself or a way to love other people, also a way in which you can make sure that you integrate this kind of love with the things that you do, the work that you do, in how you show up in all the different aspects of your life, You have to commit, in everything that you do, you have to commit and give your utmost best in everything that you do. And now that we've explored what love looks like, I want you to take a moment to reflect and ask yourself, do I know what love is? Have I felt loved before? If the answer is yes, then that's a wonderful thing. Have you extended that love to other people? And if the answer is no, this is a moment when you think to yourself, what would it have felt like had I been loved completely? And therein lies the power, because you can then create something other than what you have lost or what you didn't have. What would it have felt like had I been loved completely, totally, with wholeness? What would it have felt like? Allow your mind to run as wild as it can. Allow your mind to imagine. But now that we know what love looks like, I also want us to think about what it doesn't look like. I know that lots of us have so many limited ideas around what love is. I want us to look at those things that have been confused with love and how they affect us. But those things are not love. Many of us have grown up in environments where perhaps abuse coexisted with care. And so many of the people that we were entrusted to, whether this was in school or whether this was in your home, people would do things that were harmful to us and then claim to love us. Well, I'm here to tell you that abuse and love cannot coexist. If someone is abusing you, if someone is being cruel or unjust to you, this is not love. So whether someone beats you and then says, I do this because I love you, that isn't love. If someone abuses you on a physical level, or if someone abuses you emotionally, this isn't love either. When someone is constantly saying things that are affecting you, things that are causing you to feel less than, or things that are making you think negatively about who you are, this isn't love. And yet so many times, especially for children, you're taken off somewhere, maybe to a boarding school, and someone will constantly say the worst things to you, make you feel lower your esteem, and make you feel unworthy, and then say, I only tell you this because nobody else would tell you this. I tell you this because I love you. That is not love. There's so many ways for you to tell somebody about how they can fix things in their life without pulling them down. If this sounds a bit idealistic, then I think that it's because we have failed to define what love is, and because we want to constantly skew what love is, and we want to take away the responsibility of what an actual pure and unadulterated love would look like. So I'm reminding you again, love and abuse cannot coexist. Whether this is on a vocal or a physical level, that is not love. Because the things that people say to us, the way that other people make us feel, these are things that we carry with us for the rest of our lives. These are the mirrors, these are the smoke screens that we have to peel back, that we have to clean out so much later on in life. These are the layers that we have to keep peeling off much later on in life, because this is what we've been told, that if someone abuses you, then that is, they can still love you. But that is not true. That is actually far from the truth. What does neglect look like? Neglect looks like abandonment. When the people that are supposed to care for you and provide for you neglect your needs, they're not giving you the most basic of needs. You don't have clothes to wear, you don't have food to eat, you don't have water. Or when the people who are supposed to give you care, especially in your infancy, are entrusting you to other people who are most of the time strangers, what they've done is they have abandoned you. They've abandoned you to people whom you do not know. And sometimes the people who we are entrusted to are not going to give us as much care as the people who gave birth to us, or the people who are directly related to us. And yet we know this very well, that even sometimes, even when you're related to people, they're not going to care for you perhaps in the way that your parents would care for you. And so I don't think that neglect and love can coexist. There's so much to unpack there, but again, these are things we will keep talking about as we grow together, as we learn together. I'm just making sure you know what love doesn't look like. And the other way that we have been duped is that someone can humiliate you and still love you. Humiliation and love cannot exist in the same space. They cannot exist in the same breath. Someone can't continue to make you feel inadequate, and someone can't continue to bring you to a state of lowliness and then still claim to love you. Humiliation has a lot to do with trying to exert power. It has a lot to do with being autocratic. Someone who's autocratic is someone who has complete power within a space. And this is what happens usually in homes. You find that perhaps there's someone who has all the power in the home, and so they get to make the decisions for everybody. And in making the decisions for everybody, because it's within the confines of a home, there's nobody else to kind of just especially stand up for the children who are within that home, because you know what? We're all locked up in our own homes. And so if there is an authority figure in that home, then that's what is going to happen. I've had so many friends where we've had conversations and they'll tell you, oh, this is how I was raised. And sometimes we do not even see how there was anything wrong with that. But you see, when someone humiliates you from such a young age, what they're doing is they're kind of muting your reaction. Not kind of, they're completely muting your reaction to anything that they would do to you. They humiliate you by saying things that are dehumanizing about you, things that make you feel like you're worthless. And I do not see how worthlessness and love can coexist. And so we do not see how we carry all this emotional baggage with us into our adult age. But it does affect us, because then even when we walk into a working space, when someone humiliates you, there's no room for you to stand up for yourself. Now, of course, there are people who always work against this, even from a young age. And Bell Hooks also presents it in her book. She says she was raised in a home where there were mostly women, and so her brother was never punished for speaking his mind, but they were punished as girls. But eventually, the men, because they were less than the women, like the numbers were less than the women, they allowed them to express themselves. And it's in that way that I guess I guess it's in that way that she even learned to express herself, even through powerful, books and teaching other people about what it means to actually be loved. If someone is out there in public and perhaps they have made the commitment to you in front of a congregation, and yet they continue to humiliate you publicly and privately, for that matter, by going against perhaps the moral duty that they have or the moral obligation that they have, then that isn't love. And we need to see things for what they are. We need to understand that this, in fact, is not love. And so if this isn't love, neither is hostility. So if this isn't love, then neither is hostility. When someone says they love you, but they continue to be passive aggressive or even actively aggressive, whether that's physically or they choose to withhold action completely, this is not love. When someone has animosity towards you, this isn't love, because animosity and love cannot coexist. Love is such a tender and nurturing thing. It's such an attentive thing that it cannot coexist with something like hostility or animosity. And therefore, take this moment to think about the ways in which you have loved yourself, or in the ways that you have claimed to love other people. Are the ways in which you love other people wholesome? Are the ways in which you love yourself, most importantly, do you love yourself completely? And what are the ways in which you love yourself? What are the ways in which you have abused and neglected yourself? Take some time to think about these questions. And while you think about those questions, I want us to take a moment to think about what science says about love, even before we start thinking about how to cultivate love. What does science say about love? In reading this book, The Science of Meditation, How to Change Your Brain, Mind, and Body, I found something really interesting. We now know, brain research tells us that there are 3 kinds of empathy. Now, I know when scientists are writing about a subject like love, in their minds, they're thinking about something like empathy. So I don't want to think of empathy and love as completely different things. It's just really a use of words, and we keep mixing them up. But this is what science says about empathy. They look at 3 kinds of empathy. So we have cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy has a lot to do with understanding how a person thinks. We are able to see or perceive what their thought process. Cognitive empathy it's just a heady thing. It's more mental. It does not transcend to the heart. It's just a mental thing. I see how you think and I understand you, but hey, I don't have any sympathetic feelings towards that. And we also have emotional empathy. Emotional empathy is the ability to feel with. I don't know if anyone listening or if anyone watching has felt that moment where perhaps you see somebody who's going through so much pain, and then you start to feel the pain within your own body, or perhaps you visited a hospital and you see somebody who's going through an entire recovery process, or someone is telling you a story and then you start to feel everything that they feel. This is emotional empathy. The trouble with emotional empathy that science has found is that it mutes our ability to actually act on what it is that we're feeling. Because if you're feeling something so intensely, it's very rare that you will take the action to actually help the other person. It becomes a thing where we start to avert our gaze to painful things. So you watch someone going through pain, and then instead of being prompted to act to help them, you then mute the feeling or avert your gaze. You do not look at them. You don't want to look at the painful thing, because then it it helps you not to have to deal with the problem. It's a thing that we do in our everyday lives. You're driving by the street and perhaps there's someone in a wheelchair, or there's a child at the window asking for something to eat. And many a times, many of us just look away. That's averting your gaze. You know that you will feel the pain emotionally, or you're already feeling it, but then you don't want to see the suffering, because then it bars you from actually doing anything about the suffering of the person who you are looking at, or the person who's standing right next to you. But science now tells us at the core of empathy is compassion. Compassion, which is a profound caring. And when you have a profound caring for someone, then you're pushed to do something about the injustice that you're witnessing. This is where most people become advocates, or most people, start to fight for the well-being of other people. And they're saying, I've had the cries of the world and I want to do something about the cries of the world. I don't want to be the person who's pretending not to see. I want to do something about this. This is where love becomes action. This is the reason I was bringing in what science is now telling us about empathy. I want us to see how empathy becomes love. And love is an action. Love is a choice. Love is something that you have to keep doing. It's not a passive thing. People say, oh, I've fallen out of love with someone. And I've been guilty of the same. You're like, oh, I've fallen out of love with them. You haven't fallen out of love with the person. I don't think you ever were in love with the person, because love is active. It shows up. Love is continuing to grow, knowing that it's a knowledge, like, oh, I know these things about this person, but there's so much more I can learn. There's so much more that we can impart and exchange with each other. And so when love becomes passive, that's when love wanes. Initially, what we're fixating on, what we call love, is more of an emotional and mental energy, which is something Bell Hooks calls cathecting. You invest your mental and emotional energy into something, and then you confuse that for love. But that's not love. Love has to go beyond all that. Love gives no reason. Love doesn't ask why. I love you because. Okay, if you love me because, then it means if you love me because, then it means when the because changes, then there will not be love. There's an inclination for you to rewire your brain. There's something called neuroplasticity, and we will continue to learn about this. We now know that the brain is not rigid. No, the brain can actually evolve. It takes a lot of work for you to be able to make those changes within the brain. And one of the ways you can make those changes is to be awake. Now more than ever is the time for you to wake up. And this is why we are having so many of these conversations now. This is why you're finding so many people who are awake, people who are willing to help other people. I've seen so many, even within the Ugandan community, I've seen so many people who have abandoned their very lofty careers to come and do work that's spiritual, because we are in a time where people are leaning farther and farther away from the spiritual, and that lack of spirituality is then making us into a loveless society. It's making us into a society that's very robotic, a society that does not see the need for a love ethic. And so I want us to look at how to cultivate love. Knowing what we know now, I want us to explore how to cultivate love. You're probably asking yourself, okay, I haven't received love before. I don't know what love feels like. How can I learn to love myself? And how can I learn to love other people, especially the people that God has entrusted to me? How can I learn to be one with love? We have talked a lot about self-awareness. And one of the first things that will teach you how to love is to see yourself as you really are. There's no way for you to change things, or there's no way for you to become who you want to be without actually first seeing yourself for who you are. You have to see yourself for who you are, no matter how you are. Everything about you, and you have to love those parts of you, even the parts of you that are still very tender, the parts of you that still need nurturing and love. You have to see yourself as you are, the bad and the good, the darkness and the light. All those things are the things that make you complete. All those things are the things that make you who you are. And so that aspect cannot be missing. And that's why we keep emphasizing, know thyself. Know thyself, because when you know thyself, then you are loving even to the parts of you that are not easy for you to love. You accept them because you realize that in accepting them is when you start to change. So the aspect of seeing yourself as you are also allows you to see other people as they are. You open your mind and realize that people are not just the things that you have seen now. People are also a collection of their experiences and the things that they've gone through. And so in order for us to be able to see other people for who they are, it starts with us seeing ourselves for who we are. Another art that's lost to us as a society. We have lost the art of being truthful. And so many of us are now confusing privacy and secrecy. But the two are completely different. There are people who practice secrecy and then call that privacy, but the two are not the same thing. Secrecy has a lot to do with withholding information from someone that you believe would be vital. I'm thinking of a story about an acquaintance who. I'm thinking of a story about a friend who was telling me about a cousin of theirs who got married. I'm not sure I should share this story, but anyway. Telling the truth. I'm just going to take that again. Telling the truth is essential. It's essential in learning how to cultivate love. When we are in our foundational stages, many of us are taught how to lie. Duplicity becomes a daily thing because we realize very quickly that every time we say things that are honest, especially every time we say things that are honest, especially in the environments that we grow up in, we find that the things that we tell other people that are honest are painful. And so then from a young age, we're taught not to say the truth because then the truth tends to hurt people. And then there's a confusion that then comes even as we get older. Away from that, people start to confuse secrecy with privacy. What do I mean by this? There's so many people who withhold things or information that would be vital to connection because they are afraid of hurting the other person. But essentially, that's you building a foundation on lies. And we all know that that's a foundation that's very shaky, whether that's in relation to yourself. If you construct a self that is not grounded in the truth, then you risk creating success on a foundation that's shaky. And for that very reason, things are bound to crumble at some point in time, because then you realize that you've created a world that's actually not real. You've created ideas that are grounded in a lie. Privacy and secrecy are two completely different things. Secrecy has a lot to do with withholding important information, and privacy has a lot to do with requiring a safe space in order for you to, share when you want to, or what, not even just when you want to, but what you want to. And in doing this, cultivating truthfulness in how we speak and how we interact with other people. Another way in which we can cultivate love is by examining the negative beliefs that we have and the behavior patterns. These stories that we have told about ourselves and what we believe about love can affect how we love. It can affect how we love ourselves, how we love other people. Those beliefs that shape your sense of self and identity are very crucial. You have to examine them. Again, then this goes back to awareness. You have to ask yourself, what is it that I believe about love? What is it that I was taught about love? But in order for you to restructure this entire way of thinking, you have to let go of the grief of a love that was lost to you. I was listening to a podcast one time, and one of the speakers said, we have to let go of what it is that we didn't have in order to construct what it is that we wish to have for ourselves and for the people with whom we share our lives. So examination is very crucial. Again, it goes back to those small practices like journaling. I love to journal because when my mind is feeling a little convoluted, when everything seems chaotic, when things are going up in flames, or even when things are going really good, because you don't have to only journal when you're feeling pain. When things are going really well as well, it's good for you to pen down your thoughts about everything that's happening. It really helps you to put things into perspective. It gives you a 360 more often than not, especially if you're asking the right questions. That's why it's important for us to ask the right questions in order to get the right answers. And I usually refrain from asking the question of why, because why gives me so many reasons. But at the same time, there are times when you need to ask the why to get to the root of everything. Because at the end of the day, if you keep asking why, then you might find that your answer keeps changing. It keeps being refined. And so, but I prefer to ask what questions and how questions because they give me a sense of control, and they empower me to actually move past what it is that I am feeling in that moment, because I'm able to think outside of the box. I'm thinking in a completely different way, in a way that's more in a way that opens up my mind and in a way that opens up my heart. You can also cultivate love by living purposefully. What do I mean by this? Living purposefully. Living purposefully has a lot to do with creating goals and finding out those small, simple steps that you can take in achieving your goals. Your reason for living. When you wake up in the morning, when you're cultivating love, it has a lot to do with what's my why for today. It doesn't even have to be a why in the grand scheme of things. It can just be a why for today. Today is so difficult for me to wake up, but why is it that I need, why do I need to wake up? What is my reason for waking up today? How do I want to show up in the world today? And what are some of the goals I can set up today? Because if you're like me, I struggle to have like really large goals. And so if a goal is so large, I want to break it down into those small, simple steps that I can take to achieve that very big goal. And once I've broken down that goal into small, simple steps, I have to then see, does it align with my behavior and my actions? And if it does align with my behavior and actions, then what is the desired outcome? Once the desired outcome is here, then what next? What do I do after that? I like how Jim Quick talks about goals, actually, in how he talks about living purposefully. He talks about goals he talks about goals using the acronym of HEART. HEART, I mean your heart. So he says your goals have to be healthy, they have to be enduring, they have to be alluring, they have to be relevant, and they have to be truthful to you. So if you're struggling to make goals, you can also think of them in that way, because we have been taught a lot about how to make smart goals, which I'm not even going to go into because I'm sure everyone has had the word smart. Make smart goals, But you should also make goals that align with your heart, Your goals should be healthy, enduring, alluring, relevant, and truthful to you. And in that sense, so that's how you live purposefully. In living purposefully, this is how you conquer low self-esteem, especially if it's something that was ingrained in you in your foundational stages as a child. It takes a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work for you to heal from some of the things that you've been conditioned to do. But you have to be willing to do the work, because that's the work that will set you free. If you start to love yourself actively and not passively, you'll start to see a lot of changes in your life, in how you relate with other people, in how you relate with yourself, in how you work, how you do your work. Whether this is work you particularly do not find interesting or it's stressing you out, you will find ways to navigate it, because you know what? Guess what? We are adults. Sometimes we're going to have to do work that we don't want to do in order to feed the things that we want to do. That's a realistic way to look at it. So if there are aspects about your work that you don't like, then focus on the things that the work does for you, so that you then don't feel like you're slaving away at a job. For example, even if your only goal with the work is the money, let that be your inspiration. The next time you're feeling so frustrated about your work, you're like, I get the check. And when I get the check, I get to do my hobbies, or I get to travel, or that's a way in which you've found a way to navigate something that you actually don't find very enjoyable, because you found a reason for doing the work. The aspect of love that's missing in our society today is the aspect of communion. We have forgotten about how to commune with others, and most of us are so isolated. We spend so much time by ourselves. But you see, the thing about being isolated, and I'm speaking from experience, is you make yourself a very easy target, because you do not know what's happening around you. You become very ignorant about the things that are happening around you, because you're in your own bubble, to say the least. So in order for you to cultivate love, love has to be cultivated out there. You cannot isolate yourself and then think that you're going to cultivate a love that is wholesome. We need to commune with others. And so for that reason, this is the reason I appreciate religious sects, for that matter. Or this is the reason I appreciate spiritual practices, because then they call of you to actually commune with other people, whether that's in a church or a mosque. You get to be with other people, and there is so much power in a collective, because I strongly, strongly believe that we cannot do this life thing alone. We were not made to do this life thing alone. And yet in a society that has become so individualistic, even in spiritual practices, there's so many spiritual practices that focus so much on just knowing yourself. And then we do not see how we do not see how knowing ourselves can be integrated into how we relate with other people. There was a monk who went to the mountains. And when this monk went to the mountains, of course, there are moments for us to retreat. We're not always supposed to be communing with others, because there's also a lot of peace to be found in silence and solitude. But solitude and loneliness are two completely different things. But anyway, I believe that the monk was seeking solitude, because in moments of solitude is also how we learn to coexist with other beings. He went up to the mountain, and when he came down from the mountain, as you know, the Indian communities, or if you've read any book or watched any movie with Indian communities, they're big and large communities, especially when it comes down to their festivals. If you've attended any Indian festival, you would know this, that their festivals are really big and large. So when he came down from the mountain, he found a little boy, and whatever the little boy was doing must have upset him. And so he took out a stick and hit the boy. And it was in that moment that the monk realized that whatever he had gone to the mountain to do in his moments of solitude, the goal had not been achieved. Because if the goal is to cultivate compassion and love towards other people, peace and harmony, then he had failed, because at the first inconvenience, he was already agitated by what had happened. So he realized he needed to go back, learn the lesson. And once you're done learning the lesson, then the real work comes with how you integrate that in the real world. Integration is so important. I cannot emphasize this enough. It's not enough to go off to a meditation retreat and, spend lots of days in silence and not be able to integrate the things that you've learned there into your waking life. So when the purpose of communion is, one, you get to hear the perspectives of other people. You get to hear the ideas of other people, to share and impart knowledge with each other. You impart and exchange information with each other. That's an aspect of love that cannot be ignored. It cannot be phased out. Our need for connection is so real. And anybody who doesn't have a lot of friends will tell you that it's a very lonely life. And the last thing you want is to be in your old age, perhaps having achieved and acquired or amassed all this wealth and not have anyone to share it with. So communion is so important. I'm actually thinking of a hymn we used to sing in church in primary school. There was a wealthy man who I'm not gonna sing it. I'm not a singer, but there was a wealthy man who invited people to a wedding, and everybody said, "I cannot come." That's what happens when you spend so much time just isolating yourself and staying away from community. You start to make these extensions to people when you feel that, oh, now I'm ready to do this. And then the rest of the world has moved on. And a friend of mine used to joke about it a lot and say, oh, we have so many people who go to the Western world, and the whole time they're in the Western world, they forget about the people who are back home. But as soon as they're about to come back home, then everyone expects you to drop everything you're doing. Oh, I'm in the country. Nobody cares if you're in the country. What, like, you have to, you reap what you sow, genuinely. And I'm not saying this from a place of malice. It's that I see this as common practice. You have to stay connected to people. I'm not saying call them every day. I'm not saying, text them all the time. But once in a while, just letting someone know that you care about them, commune with people. We need each other. We cannot stand on our own. I will emphasize that again. You cannot stand on your own. You need people. And finally, as I wrap this up, an essential way to cultivate love is faithfulness, trusting yourself, trusting other people. We have become so skeptical about, we are skeptics. We're skeptical about everything people do. When someone does something nice for you, you're very suspicious. Why are they doing this for me? Perhaps it's because you're not used to having people do things for you. I'm not saying don't be cautious, because some people tend to expect other people to do things for them because they have done things for those people. But essentially, you have to have faith, and you have to trust. You have to have faith in yourself, trust in your own abilities to be better, to be able to unlearn and learn things. And but also, essentially, you have to have faith that things can get better, things can change. Faith is for you to believe in the things that you haven't yet seen. So have that faith that things can change. Have that faith that other people can change. Have that. It's some people say faith is a hopeless thing, but I beg to differ. When you have faith and you really believe that something can change, I believe that that thing can change. Because belief is what you have when all the other things don't make sense. And yeah, so that brings us to the end of our conversation today. I'm so glad that you could join me today on this episode of Refined for the Mind. And as usual, I just want us to take a moment to kind of, sit with everything that we've learned today, how to cultivate love for yourself, what love isn't, what love is. What is the one thing you're going to take away this week? What is the one way you're going to love yourself? And if you already have these foundations within you, how are you going to extend these foundations to other people? If, let's say, you already respect yourself, you already recognize people, you care for people, you're committed, whether it's to your work or to yourself or to another person, then how are you going to extend this and teach it to other people? And how did you get to this point where you loved yourself wholesomely? Feel free to share with us on Instagram at Refined for the Mind. But right now, let's take this moment to go through a loving kindness practice. If you can find a place where you can sit comfortably in a posture that embodies wakefulness and dignity, I invite you to close your eyes gently. Observe the breath going in. And observe the breath going out. Observe the breath going in. Observe the breath going out. Where is it that you feel the breath? Do you feel it in your belly? Or do you feel it in your chest area? Maybe you feel it just right at the tip of your nose, below the nostrils, above the upper lip. Maybe you feel it as an elevation of your shoulders, the rising and falling of your shoulders. Wherever it is that you observe the breath, I want you to focus on that area. Now I want you to take all your attention to your heart. You can either place your hands on top of your heart, or leave them as they are. Now imagine the luminosity of the sun at the break of day. And if you've never seen a sunrise, that's okay. Imagine what a sunrise would look like. I want you to imagine that the sun is seated right in your heart. Its warmth, its brightness. I want you to imagine the luminosity of the sun within your own heart. What does it feel like? Are you able to expand this light to your mind? To the area between your eyes? To the area between your eyebrows? Can you feel the luminosity in the different parts of your body? From the top of your head to the bottoms of your feet. What does this vibrance feel like? Observe your breath. Breath going in and the breath going out. Keep the warmth and the luminosity of the sun within your heart. Now I want you to imagine of you. And if you're the one that needs, imagine a younger you seated right in front of you. Light from within your heart and place it in the heart of that other being in front of you. See how the luminosity covers them. Can you feel within you and within the other being? Observe within yourself whatever color it is, because light allow your mind to imagine an expansive beams out of you through your heart to all beings outside of yourself. Allow this light to beam from the front and from the top to the bottoms of your feet. To beam to all beings, visible and invisible. How far does your light go? This light, if you're not yet able to, gently return to your breath. Inhale, peace. Exhale, release. Inhale, peace. Exhale, release. Inhale, peace. Exhale, release. Gently open your eyes. You're listening to Refined for the Mind, and thank you for joining me today. I pray that you take a moment, whenever you can, to just breathe in and remember that this light is a part of you. And if you ever need to use your imagination to then bring the light to you, that's also okay. Just know that the light is always within you. Go out there, love yourself, love other people, and have a wonderful week. Take care. See you next week on Thursday.